Hi. Hello. Welcome to everyone. I'm excited to kick off the first formal of our formally credited versions of our Berkeley method of entrepreneurship bootcamp. I'm Ikhlaq Sidhu. I'm the Chief Scientist and Founding Director of Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. It's located in the Industrial Engineering and Operations Research Department within the College of Engineering. And we are hosting this with Skydeck, the accelerator on campus, a close partner of ours. And as a point of reference, I am aware that Jeff Burton, our director for Skydeck, is sitting right here. And I am also aware that Department Head of Industrial Engineering and Operations Research is also here, standing right back there. So, with that, welcome to all of you. Basically to all the participants, this is a hybrid class. And we have a mixture of people here. We have people who are Berkeley students. We have a number of you who traveled pretty far to be here from many countries, Mexico, Chile, France, so forth, from all over the world who've come here, international students. We have students who are incubating their ventures in Skydeck and in other places on Berkeley. We have Baker Fellows who are here. And we have faculty from our global partner institutions who are also here. So it's a diverse group of people, and we're very happy about that. So welcome to all of you. I think there's probably just kind of a few words from our sponsors in a way that we're going to say. But this is going to be pretty short, and really what I want to do is get started and talk about the concepts of technology and entrepreneurship. And that's, so just to give you what I'm going to consider the slightest amount of background about the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, I'll just say that we are well known for creating this Berkeley method of entrepreneurship. This is co-developed by Ken Singer and myself. Ken is in the back of the room. You'll hear from him shortly, right after me. I'll properly introduce him at that time. And one thing about the center that we want you to know is that this method, it results in a lot of things. It results in students who actually create new ventures. It results in alumni who go into large existing companies and innovate there. It's also a path to connect into the Bay Area ecosystem, the new venture ecosystem. And there's a lot of very interesting projects, technical projects and otherwise, that are done as part of our whole collection of activities here. The other quick thing that I think you should know is that there's quite a bit of activity that goes on. There's lots of students, lots of projects. Many speakers come from all over the place, very interesting people, high-profile people. There's an alumni network now. There's probably 4,000 alumni, and there's at least 20 global partners that are a part of it. And on the other side, students really do start ventures, and there's many companies that have come out of the process of teaching entrepreneurship in this way. Now, if you've been to our website, and it's okay if you haven't, but if you have, you may have noticed that we have a picture like this that describes our curriculum. And this red circle describes where you are right now. This is the Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship Bootcamp, and it is one of the kind of first steps of the way that we think about teaching entrepreneurship. It's pretty compact. It's just these 4 days, and we're gonna expose you to a lot of ideas in these next 4 days. But another thing that happens quite often for people early going into this curriculum is that they will take our lecture series, and this is about awareness and to understand the theoretical aspects. There are a number of courses that people take that are Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship approved, and this is where people practice various things. And really what's important, I just want to get this message across, I'll probably say it like 3 times, is that there are 2 paths of things that come out of the center. That there's an industry path, and people take these same courses and they go off and they are in all of the Bay Area and global companies, and they innovate there. and they take the same courses, but sometimes ideas that come out of these courses end up being incubated in a combination of Venture Lab, which is a mentoring process, and Skydeck, which of course is the accelerator. And the combination of these two let these companies actually grow and connect and actually launch and go become new ventures. So that's the model, I guess, the journey, so forth. And there's multiple opportunities with it. A couple administrative matters. One is, what's our goal? So first goal is we just want to make sure you understand entrepreneurship is not mysterious. It's not like one of those things that, you know, just some rare person knew how to put the right pieces together and somehow something happened. But it's something that can be done. It can be learned. We believe that we can teach you the types of things that you can do to innovate and to create new things. And you know, people create new things all the time, and many, many people create new things all the time. The theory is not hard to understand. Unlike learning Maxwell equations or differential equations or any number of technical topics, the theory here is very understandable. The practice of it takes more work. So so you can learn in a relatively short time what are the ideas, what are the kind of judgment rules, what type of way that you might go about thinking to achieve results. To actually do it, that's why we have all these other classes, that's why we have Skydeck, that's why we have the incubation. We have to give you more time to do something with these things. But anyway, it's not mysterious, theory is not hard, and from here we hope that you will execute and be able to take these things with you. Again, it's valuable if you start a new company. It's valuable if you work at a new venture, that is, even if you don't start it, to understand what it's like to be in a new company. And it's valuable if you're going to innovate in a larger firm. The other administrative thing, just in case you didn't know, there's 4 days. It's not just today. So we'll see you all week. For those of you who are taking it for credit, it's 1 unit. There's approximately 32 hours of actual class plus homework time combined. You'll be doing certain exercises. Again, for those who are taking credit, we're going to ask you for a 1 to 2 page reflection at the end. And of course, it's a hybrid model, so there are global participants. And it's very important that you are here providing this global perspective, because the diversity of ideas is very important in entrepreneurship, and we'll talk about that as well. So, and of course, welcome to you for, I hope you're over your jet lag, because we'll probably tire you out by the time you're done. Okay, so now let me just dispel a few misconceptions and just kind of mention, kind of help you unlearn a few things that you might be thinking coming into a boot camp on entrepreneurship. The first misconception is simply that you can follow this kind of order of steps, that you can have this idea, you write this plan, and it's got all of these technical details, the business model and how big is the market, and all of the kind of detail of how you're going to create the business. You take that and you get funding, and then you take that money and you build a product, and then you go off and sell it. And that all sounds great in theory, but it really doesn't work that way. It's not linear. And I mean, if you think about it, can you really write a plan if you never tried to sell the idea? If you haven't talked to the customers, how valuable is this plan going to be? Could you raise funds? You know, how credible are you with your investor if you haven't really been talking to customers up until this moment? And so, like, the idea that you just go through this order doesn't actually, I mean, it doesn't make sense if you just think about it. But somehow we believe that it is linear like that, and I'll just say it's not. It's a lot more people-oriented. There's a lot more people skills involved, and we'll explain what we mean about that in a little bit of time. And there's a number of unwritten rules. Unwritten rules really is another way to say culture. It's a set of rules that people know, and there is such a thing as entrepreneurial culture, and we'll help you understand what that is as well. And of course, there's never enough data to make a business plan. I think by now it's fairly, a long time, for, I don't know, 30 or 40 years, people have been teaching entrepreneurship by basically making everyone write a business plan. I think the most famous one is probably the FedEx business plan at Harvard, which got a C. And then, of course, in reality, it turned into like the biggest business that ever came out. Anyway, in reality, the terminology which I hear, I think I hear this more from Steve Blank than anyone else, but he refers to business plans as fairy tales. That is because it's just something you wish would happen, but you really don't have the data to support what is going to happen. Second thing is, we can't teach it prescriptively. We can't teach it like a recipe. We can't tell you, here's step 1, 2, 3, just do these things. And that's because everything that you're doing is something new. So there isn't yet an exact recipe for you to do it. The third thing is, we can't teach it in a way that you just memorize a lot of things, and that if you memorize it and you can repeat it back to us, it doesn't mean that you're any more capable of actually doing it in real life, right? So that's also not the way that we're going to do it. So hopefully, so now that I've kind of dispelled the way that we don't want you to try to learn entrepreneurship, I want to tell you the theoretical or the fundamental ideas that we actually do want to introduce through the next few days. Okay, so to start off, where do ideas come from? Here's a quick list of different things. Frustration and pain, yes, there must be a better way. New technology capabilities, sure. Understanding the needs of people, understanding people and their needs. The idea that some organizations are slow and fat, and things could be done better than them. They could be disrupted. Arbitrage, anytime that you can trade something between people where in one place it's worth more than it's worth in another place. Changes that you think will happen or changes that are happening in the world. And of course, then there's the idea of getting people together, getting the right people together. So which one is it? Where does it actually come from? Obviously, it's all of these. And in fact, the point is, it really doesn't matter which one of these you start with. You're probably going to cross through all of these ideas at some point. So even if you're starting with a technology, at some point, all of these other things will come into play in terms of what you're actually going to do. Now, here's the first thing that I want to get across in the introduction, which is that your idea or your plan is just the starting point. Okay? So here's what you might imagine that your plan is. You've got some direction that you want to go. It seems like a great idea, and you're just going to go in that direction, and it's going to be a success. And in reality, it's really this nonlinear process. It's very, there's all these curves and changes in directions. And so as you start to do something, really what's happening is the whole world is changing around you. And so what you thought would be a good step, it might not be a good step in 3 weeks. And so you're living in an environment where you're constantly changing because the environment is changing. That's one of the reasons it's hard to make the plan. And the key question here, which I'm bringing up, is that the first time that you run into one of these changes, how are you going to handle the fact that everything changed around you? Okay? So, there's a couple options. One is that you can melt down, and you can, just be in despair that it's not working according to your plan. Another is that you can go to a meeting and say all of the wrong things, or you can keep pushing hard and you can destroy the team and destroy relationships, and basically a lot of things can go in that direction. Or you would be able to learn, adapt, innovate. You would see what's happening in the environment and you would actually adjust for it. And it depends on two things. It depends on your technical skills, because what you think you need to do, you actually need to be able to do it. But it also depends, and this is a really important one, on your people skills, on and even your understanding of other people and kind of the mindset you have and your understanding of the psychology of what's going around. This combination of what you can actually do and how well you can work with other people is actually what's going to make the difference of how you navigate all the changes that go on. Okay? So how do you actually do this navigation? This is concept number 2, is that just like people learn, and people learn in science, people learn in business, companies also learn. Okay? Companies are a little bit like people, and everyone and companies also go through a learning cycle. And it's pretty simple. There's an idea of induction, looking around the environment, trying to understand what's actually going on, building a story, verifying it, and adapting. So, you know, basically at some point you got a hypothesis for something that's going on. You make something, and that could be a prototype of something. It could be just a pitch. It could be a story. But there's something that you're making, creating, because of your hypothesis. And then what you do is you basically demonstrate or pitch that to other people. And the point of the pitch is, while you could say the point is to sell something, in the really early stage, the point is actually to collect stakeholders. So when you're telling it to a customer, it's because you need customers. And when you're telling it to an investor, it's because you need an investor. When if you're telling it to a friend, it's because maybe that you want them to join you. But the whole goal is, are you bringing people to the story that you are developing? Or are you just going to keep going around the circle and you're the only one that knows this story? If after a year and a half, you're the only one telling the story and nobody else is part of it, something's broken in the cycle. Either you're not learning that it's not working, or you're not communicating the story, or you're not really taking feedback, or you're not thinking. Something is broken in this cycle if you're not collecting any resources and any people in here. A second idea here is, are you going to be self-aware enough to learn, to go through this learning cycle? So, for example, you are through this thing and you're at the meeting with your first potential customer, and they say, yeah, okay, you showed them this like really great, exciting idea that you could be our customer for this, and they say, that's not really that big of a problem to me. I could tell you about some other problems I actually have, but this thing, it's like I can't really spend that much more time talking to you about it. Now, if you are not very self-aware, what will happen is you will say, you know what? That customer is just a stupid customer, and they just don't understand why my idea is so fantastic, okay? That is a result that you can get out of that meeting. And so then what you do is you go look for other people who will validate that you are smart, right? You go look for people to say, oh no, you got a really good idea. And so pretty soon you've got your mom as a stakeholder and like 2 other people, but you're not really making progress, you're just self-validating. But if you're actually aware, what you'll say is, oh really? Tell me about that other problem. Because that's where there was actually hugely valuable information and they almost let you into it, but it was your choice whether you were going to take that or whether you were going to ignore it and just stay on the circle that doesn't help you navigate what's going on. Anyway, let's see. So this is the learning cycle. It's basically concept number 2. Concept number 3 is that, as I said, companies learn, and you can go through this cycle. When you're doing it in a class, when you're doing it in a boot camp, when you're really early, you can do that cycle every week. Lean Launch is a version of that. So this idea that you go talk to a customer, validate something, go talk to another customer, that you do it very quickly, that's fine. In really early stage, you can do it every week. When you get a little farther along, we use a different process. We use a different process when we are in Venture Lab and or Skydeck. And what we would do, say, in Venture Lab is we would say, well, how far along are you by now and we're a little more focused on milestones by this point. And so we'd say, well, these are the pieces of a company. Your company is getting a little bit more complex. What do you have? Do you have a compelling story? Do you have a product? Do you know that what you're making is actually something that someone wants to buy? Do you actually have the product? Do you have a business model? Do you have stakeholders, other people who are part of this? Do you have actually some sort of deal, some employment agreement? Do you have some investor agreement? Do you have a customer agreement, an agreement to buy something? Like, what do you actually have? And then do a little assessment and work backwards and say, where are you trying to get to? What do you have right now? And what could you achieve in 3 months? Right? So this is not every week, but set a goal for 3 months and try to figure out, what are your assumptions, and try to do that. And you learn in that 3-month period, and then you can set a different target 3 months later. That's okay. So what's happening is the learning cycle is still happening, but it's taking longer. First, it's every week. Then it's over 3 months. By the time it's in Skydeck, it's 6 months. By the time it's a larger company, you've got this yearly planning cycle. Some really complicated projects, you don't get feedback for 3 or 4 years when they get real, when it gets to be a big organization. So the cycle gets longer over time. Okay, concept number 4. I want to tell you, question.
Can we get a copy of the slides?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. I didn't post them yet, but I will. After your feedback and after you tell me what's completely wrong with them, then I'll fix them because I'm taking feedback and learning, and then I will post them. Okay. All right. All right. So the 4th concept I want to tell you is basically the idea of connectors versus builders. So here's an entrepreneur, Larry Bach. Meet him, I guess. What's interesting about him, first of all, he's in the life science area, and he's invests and co-founds companies and so forth. He has co-founded 40 different companies, early stage finance or co-founded, 40. And there's a total market capitalization of $40 billion of the things that he's created. How can anyone create 40 companies? I mean, even if it takes you like a year to get a company off the ground, isn't that like 40 years? I mean, like, can you see why this is amazing? That, you can actually do this? Or how could you do it, right? And the way that he does this is he sees an emerging area, that something in life science in general. And he says, well, starts asking people, if I was going to start a company, who are the 5 leaders in this new emerging area? Who are those people, right? And when you go to those people, and you go to one of them and say, tell me what's going on, I'm just interested to know. And by the way, who are the other kind of 5 people in the world that are really, in your mind, the top leaders in this kind of emerging area? And pretty soon the same 5 names come up. And then what he does is he tries to get those 5 people together. His job is just to bring them together. And he does not know what the market entry is going to be. He doesn't have the prototype. He doesn't have any of these things. All he does is bring those right 5 people together. And guess what? They have all these things because they are the right people. So they already had the demo product. They already had the connection for the first customer. They had everything that you need to have. So by bringing them together and getting them to agree to work together, the company starts almost immediately. So he is what you would call a connector, right? The idea. So there's a way that you can build a company kind of from scratch, which is you ran into this problem and you saw it and then you thought, well, you know what? I think I can fix it, and there's other people who have the same problem. Or there's this other version. There's people who connect to other people and they bring them to you. And there's 2 other famous entrepreneurs on the right. You recognize them. That's Steve Jobs on the top and Steve Wozniak. Both are founders of Apple. And when you think about Steve Jobs, he's a builder, but I'd say even more he's a connector. He's a person who brought a lot of other people to what he was doing. Steve Wozniak, I'd say he was more of a builder and less of a connector. And you can see how they both work together and how they work within the company. So the simple idea here is when when you're developing your company, there's more than one kind of entrepreneur. And some of them, and on your team, it would be good if you had someone that is more of a connector, because they're going to bring people to you. And you need people who have building skills. They're both important. So don't think that there's only one type. Okay. Point number 5, mindset and culture. So here's 2 cities, Chicago and San Diego. Both of them are similar size population centers. They both have similar ranking universities. They have a similar amount of money in their ecosystem. I think the people who work there are roughly equally skilled. But San Diego has about 300 new ventures that are incubating or starting every year, 300. And Chicago, it's like almost nothing, turns out. And why is that? And really, this is my point here, that beyond beyond the basics of having educated people and having money in the area, how people interact with each other also leads to whether companies will start or whether companies will not start, how they are working together. And that's really the point of entrepreneurial culture. And we've spent some time thinking about entrepreneurial culture and what are these interactions. And that's something also that we're bringing into the bootcamp. And I'm going to just tell you what these what these things are. We listed these also in a paper called Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship, which you don't have to read because you're here. So here are some cultural behaviors of entrepreneurs. One is the idea of pay it forward. It's the idea that you get help from some people and you give help to other people. You don't have to help only the people that help you. You're building a system where people are helping each other. A second one is storytelling, and this is a little bit similar to the circular slide that I told you, but it's basically you realize something and you learn to communicate it in a story. If it's really new, there aren't words for it, there isn't something simple way that you can explain it, and you have to learn how to tell these stories. But if the story is effective, you are bringing other people to you and helping you get your venture going. I will say, I never fully appreciated until more recently the value of the storytelling. I think I always did it, like I had the capability myself to create those narratives. But the difference between being a builder is that you spend all your time working on the thing, whatever it is. But if you can also generate the story, the difference is that other people will come and help you, and that's much faster than the amount of time that you spend building only by yourself. And so there's the trade-off there. Third one is trust. Learning to share ideas and trust people even though you don't know them very well. And while things can go wrong, what it means in an entrepreneurial culture is the faster you get feedback from people, the faster everyone is learning. So if you're in an environment where people are not sharing information, they think they have a brilliant idea, but they don't tell anybody for 2 weeks because they're waiting for trust to build, in another place where the trust is already there, the ideas are improving every day and much quicker. And so in the end, you can't compete against a culture where there is this free-flowing information. Another one is seeking fairness in negotiations. Some people, they negotiate so that everything that you get is something that someone else loses. And the end of that negotiation, the other person feels that they don't really want to negotiate with you anymore. But in an entrepreneurial environment, you don't know when you're going to need the same person again for something else. So you always want to negotiate in a way that it's good for both of you in some respect, and that you can come back to them, that you build long-term relationships in your negotiations. Building resilience, or understanding that failure is part of it. I almost don't need to say anything more. We'll talk about this, of course, more through the bootcamp. Number 6 is diversifying your networks. There is an idea that people first of all, businesses are made when people exchange, trade things with each other. That's why people work together, because somebody can do something, someone knows someone has a different skill. When they work together, they're trading skills or they're trading information. If you work with people who are exactly like you, it's impossible for you to trade anything. There's no value for you to trade with them. So it's really important that you actually work with people who are not like you. That's where the ideas come from. That's where value comes from. But those people who are not like you are exactly the people where you have the most social barriers. They're the people who you actually don't want to talk to. So you've got to overcome that. If you want to get to value, want to get to entrepreneurship, you have to learn to be comfortable talking to the people who are not like you. 7 good enough versions of resource allocation. If you're perfecting something, there's something else that you could be doing with that time that is probably another problem. And so understanding where good enough is an important part of entrepreneurship. 8, collaboration. Of course, schoolwork is very individualistic. Entrepreneurship is much more team-oriented, people working together. But more than that, it's also not black and white who you're collaborating with. Lots of times, you have relationships with even people who are competing with you, and you'll work together on some things, and you might compete on something else. So it's not this hard rule that there are people that you don't collaborate with. At some level, you collaborate even with people that are working against you in some other way. And you have to get yourself to be able to do that. Of course, believe that you can actually do it. And being a role model for others, that's basically a lead by example concept. If anything, I'd say this is the ethics principle of entrepreneurship. Do things that other entrepreneurs would say, oh, that's great that you did it, right? Okay. Last point down here, if everybody in your community acts like this, then if you're in an incubator or if you're in a group of people that have this kind of interactions with each other, then the chance of your startup turning into something become much better. You're part of an entrepreneurial culture. So kind of bind together with people who can have these types of cultural behaviors. Okay? Now, there's one more idea that I want to get across here, and that is this idea of what drives entrepreneurs and what drives you, actually. And I want you to figure out for yourselves, where and how you will innovate. So let me just take this parallel. Let's go back like 300 or 400 years and say that you wanted to build something, or you're going to choose what you're going to work on and do. And you've got a couple options. One is that you can live in this castle. You're not the king, though. Okay? You can live in the castle, but you're like a butler or a maid, or you're there. Okay? You're just not running it. And think about what are the kind of survival skills that you need to exist in that castle. There's some benefits. First of all, you don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about your protection. There's a whole army around you. You can, as long as you follow a certain set of rules and you understand the etiquette of the castle and you understand certain kind of political dynamics, you're fine. You're quite comfortable in the castle. Now, some people, that is really what they wanted. That they're happy with that. They're truly happy with that because they don't have to worry about a lot of other things. They're kind of taken care of in that model. But there are some people who hate that idea, who could not be happy trying to just follow that set of rules, and they would rather leave all of that. They'd rather leave that, and they'd rather go live in this. They'd rather go way outside of all of the comforts and all of the protections, and they'd try to work on building this log cabin somewhere far away, like maybe even across the ocean, as far as they had to go to be able to build it themselves. And their hope is that one day they would, work up and build a larger community, and it's separate. And you think about the skills that you need to live and to build this, it's completely different. So if, it doesn't matter how many manners you had, which would be great if you were the butler in the castle, when you're being attacked by a bear, it doesn't really help you to have great manners. what helps you is certain types of survival skills and certain types of independence. In the entrepreneurial context, those skills are ways that you can influence people. They are the ability to sell things. It is this ability to induce what's actually going on. It's to understand where your value can fit in. You have to be much more independently aware of how to survive. But if you would like to do that, you have the opportunity to build whatever you want to build. And there's a third option, and I just want to point out this third option. And the third option is there's all this land in the countryside. I'm going to say that this is like corporate entrepreneurship. This is you work in a company, but not necessarily in the normal operations of the company, but you are experimenting with new ideas or directions that the company can go. So it's kind of like you're on the grounds of the castle. You might not be, right in the castle, and there's a certain amount of freedom, but at the same time, those grounds are not really your grounds. So at some point, if the kingdom decides they want to reallocate the resources or use that land for something else or whatever, they can do that at any time. So you can benefit from a certain amount of protection, but then you also have to be aligned with the strategy, and you have to know what's going on in the kingdom for you to survive. So you can decide where you would rather be, whether you'd rather be in the castle, you want to be this entrepreneur that's completely far out, or whether you want to work inside a company and innovate. There's kind of this spectrum of things. Okay. So given all of that, this is what we want you to learn in the bootcamp, what we want to explain to you. We want you to have some practice finding and evaluating opportunities. We want you to understand these learning cycles, certainly the psychology of entrepreneurs. For this, actually, let me just go on with the list. I'll bring up this point in a second. The mindset of entrepreneurs, judgment of what to expect. We can do that through theory and cases, and you'll see some cases. A customer viewpoint, obviously important. The idea of diversity within team formation, and basically how do you put teams together. Pitching, selling, storytelling, that's an important idea in entrepreneurship. It's towards developing stakeholders, getting other people to be part of what you're doing. And of course, part of our model is networks, mentors, angels, basically getting you a network that you can actually use to experiment with your new venture. So this is finally the summary here. Berkeley method of entrepreneurship. We have a set of theories and cases, and I'm giving you a window into some of. Anyway, I'm giving you an idea that there's certain things that are taught this way. There's level 3 down there, which is the network and the environment. That includes Skydeck, that includes Venture Lab, that includes the network, the ecosystem of people that we have and develop for this purpose. And it includes the second level, which is an understanding of the mindset, culture, and social psychology. Basically, those cultural behaviors. And the one thing I'll say on that is, even if I tell you what those cultural behaviors are, it doesn't mean that you will act in that way in the real situation. So for that, and really Ken Singer, who I'm about to introduce in a minute, is the game master. I'm going to use that word for the first time. He's the one who is behind the idea of developing games and exercises that make it so that you don't just know what those rules are, but that you would actually naturally act like that in an entrepreneurial way when the time comes. So that's the way that we teach this. This is the types of things that we want you to know out of the bootcamp. We think you're going to have a really good time. At least I hope so. And with that, I think there's not really a break. I'm just going to ask Ken Singer to come up. Ken is the Managing Director of Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. He is a serial entrepreneur. He started a number of companies, and he's also created from scratch the mobile applications course, which is developed into the Challenge Lab here at in Berkeley and in Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. And I'm sure there's many other things that I'm forgetting, co-developer of Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship, and I don't know, there might be some pets to mention too and hobbies. But anyway, Ken Singer.